Hailey, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing the books that I just couldn't even finish. So don't get me wrong when I say that, like, it's not like these books are horrible, they just weren't my taste. And I started a couple years ago now DNFing books, which DNF is did not finish. And it made a huge difference in my reading and how much I was actually able to read. It seems kind of counterintuitive, like not finishing every single book that I would start would make it so I wouldn't be able to read as much, but that actually wasn't the case at all. It had the opposite effect, because whenever I started a book and found that it wasn't really for me, I wasn't vibing with it or clicking with it, and I gave myself the freedom to just close it up and move on to something that I would enjoy, I found, one, I was reading more, and two, I was enjoying what I read a lot more, which, believe it or not, makes a huge difference. So if you are one of those people who feels like you have to finish every single book that you start, I do encourage you to take a step back and maybe try out not finishing every book that you start. If there's something that you're not liking, or you just don't feel like it's worth it to go the entire way through, then why finish it? Like, you only have so much time to read. There's only so many books you can read. So I found it very liberating, and you might too. But I do also understand if you feel like you have to finish everything that you start. It's fine. Just like, maybe try it out if you can. That being said, I am always really disappointed when I can't make it the whole way through a book. I'm happy with my decision and I don't revisit them, but it does still suck because it would be a book that, like, obviously I was excited enough to pick up and to buy. So the fact that it just never worked out for me is tragic. It feels like a missed opportunity. But without further ado, let's just get to the books that has been the case for. So if you guys like bookish content, don't forget to click that subscribe button, then click that bell icon so you'll be notified whenever I post. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week. And without further ado, let's just get into the list. I also actually wanted to add that personally, I will mark the books that I didn't finish as read on Goodreads. That's just my own decision because I did at least read some of it, so it does still count toward my Goodreads goal, but my Goodreads goal isn't for anyone except for me. It's just a personal challenge to myself. So I know some people might see that as cheating, but like, it's not that deep, folks, let me tell you. So I just wanted to pop in for a second here to take a second to thank the sponsor for today's video, Babbel. So specifically, I'm talking about Babbel Live, which the Babbel app has been so helpful in my journey to learn French. I've talked about it quite a bit and I love it, but they also have Babbel Live now, which is a really cool feature where you can sign up for unlimited live courses. So it's actually like you in a Zoom with a teacher and other students. It's an immersive and engaging experience, and I have super been enjoying it. I love the fact that Babbel really gets into things, like it's not just teaching you the bare minimum, it's teaching you the cultural context of things and the pronunciation and grammar and those important things as well, but it's a very well-rounded look at a language. The teachers are certified and the classes are small groups, so it's 6 students max, which is really awesome because then you kind of don't get lost in the crowd. You're able to interact and understand things more, and the courses also cover a variety of topics, which is really cool. I just think it has taken my French learning to that next level, which is exactly what I've needed. Like, it has been so helpful with integrating with the new society that I'm in, because I've moved from English-speaking Canada to French-speaking Canada, and it's been really hard, but I find that using Babbel and using Babbel Live has helped me to feel a lot more confident in my ability to integrate into where I'm living. I love how the classes aren't boring. It feels interesting and engaging, and I felt like the teacher did an amazing job. So I had so much fun with it, and it's definitely something I am going to continue to use, and I highly recommend that you guys check it out. Check out the Babbel app and Babbel Live. I will have a link down below, and they actually have been kind enough to offer you guys up to 65% off of your subscription when you click the link in my description box. So definitely check it out, and thank you so much to Babbel for working with me once again. I also totally forgot to show you guys how I can order my coffee in French at Tim Hortons, which is amazing. So, je prends un café très grand avec un lait et 2 Splenda.
I know that there's a word for sweetener, but in Quebec they say Splenda, so yeah.
So the first book that I didn't finish is actually one that I tried to read earlier this year, and that is Sky Hunter by Marie Lu. So Marie Lu is an author that is very well established, and I have enjoyed a lot of her books, but unfortunately Skywalker just did not work out for me, and I just felt so confused. I got about halfway through this one and just didn't see the point in continuing because I wasn't connected to the characters or anything, and because I didn't really understand exactly what was happening, it just didn't seem worth it to me. I think part of the issue for this one, for me, is very personal because it's kind of a zombie-esque story. Like, it's a twist on zombies, but I don't like zombies, and there's few books that feature that sort of thing that I have enjoyed. So with it being kind of a concept that I hadn't realized it was going to be a zombie sort of thing, I just was like, I need to move on from this one. So it was interesting. It just didn't stand out to me. It was nothing special, nothing that hooked me, and I do find that so unfortunate, but it's, you know, I tried. Next is This Adventure Ends by Emma Mills. So this is a contemporary book that I had seen floating around a lot. They've redone the covers a couple of times now, actually, and the covers are always so cute. So it makes me very tempted to pick up this author's books, but I tried this one and I just did not like the writing at all. I can't remember if I ended up trying another one of her books or not, but I definitely did not click with the writing. This one, I got 70 pages into it, which doesn't really seem like a lot, but like, I feel like you kind of know if you're going to enjoy a book in the end or you're just not going to like it by that point. Especially in the case of this one, when it's the writing style that isn't really working for me, that's obviously something that isn't going to change throughout the book. And I mean, there's no shame in not matching with a writer's author's writing style, rather. It's just, you know, it's not going to be for everyone, and unfortunately that was this book for me. Although I do know a lot of people have really enjoyed this book. Same with Sky Hunter. Like, all of these books, there's definitely people out there that have really liked it. Speaking of, next is Dear Evan Hansen by Val Emmich, who is it? Val Emick, actually, I think, and Stephen Levinson, Benj Pasek, and Justin Paul. I'm trying to read it in like the tiniest, teeniest little thing on Goodreads. So this is based on the musical, and I haven't seen the musical, I haven't listened to the soundtrack or anything like that, but the book just wasn't doing it for me. I know that they're coming out with a movie adaptation of this. I'm not sure if it's out already. I probably won't watch it. I don't know, but I'm sure the musical is great. I've heard amazing things about it. Like, it was a smash hit. However, I just feel like I don't know. I just didn't like this one. I didn't really find the story interesting. I was pretty bored and just didn't like it. Next is Sky in the Deep by Adrienne Young. So some of these I have notes for why I didn't finish it. Some of them I don't. But I feel like with this one, it's probably a case of there are so many fantasy books out there. And fantasy books sometimes, like, it's a very oversaturated genre at this point. And I find it really hard to even like remembering synopsises to differentiate between them sometimes. So this one I know is supposed to be a Viking story, so I'm not exactly sure what went wrong there because that does seem pretty interesting, but I think because fantasy can kind of put me in a slump, that might be the reason why I put this one down. I don't really remember, but maybe I'll give it a second shot. I don't know. I kind of have completely forgotten about it, so obviously I didn't need to finish it. Next is Bridge of Clay by Marcus Zuzak. This one still makes me so sad. Like, it breaks my heart. So Marcus Zuzak is the author of The Book Thief, which is one of my absolute favorite books of all time. And when he was coming out with a new book, I was so excited. Like, I remember it was at my first book con and I saw that there was a line for his new book and they were only giving out like a certain number of copies, and I got a numbered copy, like they were numbered and everything, and I was so excited. And then I couldn't even finish it, and I gave it a fair shot. Like, I got a lot of the way through, but I just didn't like it. I wanted to, but it just oh my god, I didn't like it, and it makes me so sad. I had absolutely no interest in the characters and no interest in the plot. Like, I couldn't even tell you what it was about because it was entirely forgettable for me. It was a book that I tried physically reading, and then I tried the audiobook, and it just, none of it worked for me. I wanted it so badly to work, but it wasn't for me. It makes me really sad, but I have heard a lot of other people feel the same about this book, so at least it wasn't just me. But it has kind of made me, like, I also had another one of his books, but I ended up, I think I unhauled it, or I have it in a box somewhere because I just am so afraid of not liking that one either. It's I Am the Messenger, but maybe I'll try it. I don't know. It just has made me very skeptical. Next is Frankly in Love by David Yoon. So I actually have another book by this author. I ended up pre-ordering his other book. I don't really know why, because the reason that I didn't end up finishing Frankly in Love was partially the writing style, but I think that the writing style may have been specific to the story that he was writing, if that makes any sense. It seemed to suit the characters, but I just didn't really like the characters that much. I just remember there being something very different that didn't quite click with me, so I just didn't get further into the story. But the concept for his second book does seem like something I would like. It just, I don't know, it kind of let me down. I think part of it was so much hype was surrounding that book leading up to its release and everything, so I had really high expectations, and then it just didn't quite meet those. Next is A Fell Love Story by Loanne Lee, and I am so sad once again that this one didn't work out for me. So this is one that I tried to read earlier this year, and it seemed like everything that I would love. It's like kind of a Romeo and Juliet retelling. I don't know if it's formally a Romeo and Juliet retelling. I think it's just kind of has those vibes, but it's about two families. No, it definitely is actually a Romeo and Juliet retelling. I can't speak right now. But anyways, it is about two families with rival Vietnamese restaurants, and the children of each of those families end up, you know, starting a relationship, which obviously is a little bit difficult because of the rivalry and everything. And I thought it sounded so cool, so adorable, like everything I would love, but it wasn't. I didn't care for the writing so much, and I felt like the characters fell kind of flat for me. And to top it off, the characters were kind of indistinguishable. They had very similar personalities, and the fact that their backstories and their environment was so similar didn't help to distinguish them. So I kept on having to flip back to see whose perspective I was reading from, which is like a pet peeve of mine. I felt like it just had a pretty clunky narrative, and the two perspectives, in this case, it wasn't something I liked. Usually I love it, but it kind of bogged down the story because they felt just so similar. I will say this book had really great Vietnamese American representation. It gave a lot of history and culture in terms of that, which I loved, but I felt like there wasn't much going on with the plot. The main driver was kind of, why are these families enemies? But I didn't feel like there was enough else for me to ever get the answer for that. So it was just one that I felt like was way longer than it had to be, kind of danced around the point, and I just had too many issues with it to see where it was going. So I think it's a really important book still. I think it's a book that a lot of people will see themselves in, and a lot of people will probably like. It just wasn't for me. Next is Lost in the Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas. So I tried reading this book earlier this year once again. It was a Peter Pan retelling, and it's by the author of Cemetery Boys, which was one of my favorite books of last year. But unfortunately, this one did not work out for me at all. I so wanted to love this one, and I know I said that about like all of these books, but there's certain ones where I really wanted to love it. I really thought it was going to be something that I would fall in love with, and it just missed the mark. And this is definitely one that I had been so excited for. This one I came to the point where I realized it was time to DNF it when I kind of had to force myself to pick it up. Like, I could feel a slump coming on, because when I wanted to read, I didn't actually want to read, I guess. I wanted to pick up a different book. So that's when I knew it was time to unfortunately give up on this one. I don't think this was a bad book at all. I just think it was so incredibly slow, and I really struggle when the pacing of books is off, especially when it's slow. It makes it very hard for me to get into the story. And we were 40% of the way through and nothing had really happened. I still was like, I don't know where this is going, which is why I decided to not continue with it. But I felt like Peter was an interesting enough character, but the Wendy character was very one-dimensional, and I felt like the story just never came together. It was not only slow, but I think it was slow because it was very repetitive. It was just a lot of Wendy wondering, like just wondering basically about everything that was happening, just her asking questions, but you never quite got the answers, so it just kind of fell flat. Next is What's Not to Love by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca. So this author duo has written quite a few books by this point, and I have read all of them. This is the only one that I have DNF'd though. This one has a very similar concept to Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon, in the fact that it is about two academic rivals and they're competing for valedictorian, that sort of thing. They're actually competing for valedictorian, but then also, I think it's valedictorian, but then also a recommendation letter to Harvard. So they've just been academic rivals, and it's an enemies to lovers story. But oh my goodness, the characters were so annoying. Like both of them were just so obnoxious, and their relationship, like I could not. Like they hated each other quite clearly, and I was like, there's no way that this would turn to enemies, like from enemies to lovers. I struggle with enemies to lovers. I'm the first one to admit that, but in this case I was like, absolutely not. Like it was just very childish and immature, and I didn't care to see them come together because they felt very incompatible, and they just were both so irritating. The plot wasn't enough to hook me, and their relationship was so one-dimensional, and I was almost halfway through, and literally all that was happening was like meaningless interactions and bickering where they just hated each other. There was no hint of possible romance to me other than other people saying like, oh, you're just like that because you like each other, like blah blah blah. So I was super annoyed by this book, obviously, and I don't regret not having finished it. I'm sad because I really loved the cover. It looked adorable, and it did sound like it could be really cute. Like it's kind of the author's own love stories because they are together and they met as academic rivals and everything. So that seems adorable, but it wasn't. Next is The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. This book blew up, and it's kind of one that people either love or they hate, and I just didn't like it. It wasn't for me. I can totally see why people would really enjoy it because the writing was very great. Like it was beautiful writing. The concept sounded amazing, but I just was pretty confused, and maybe I'm just stupid, but I was pretty confused starting it out, and with a fantasy that confuses me like right away, it's just a no from me pretty much immediately. Honestly, I was 37 pages in according to Goodreads, and I gave up on that, and I wish that I had loved it. Like it sounded so interesting, and I totally bought into the hype, but it was just a book that wasn't for me. Next is The Beholder by Anna Bright. So this is a book that it was like The Bachelor sort of thing, but it's a fantasy and set at sea as well. But this one I essentially DNF'd because I remember it was like I was quite a ways through and nothing had really happened. I was expecting more love interest to be introduced, more romance plot line, but like there wasn't that. So I just kind of felt like I didn't get what I was expecting, so it didn't work out for me. Next is Wilder Girls by Rory Power, and this is actually a similar situation of not getting what I was expecting. This is a book that once again got so much hype leading up to its release, and I totally bought into that. But then I remember I started listening to the audiobook and I was like immediately disgusted, and it just didn't seem worth it for me. It wasn't anything wrong with the book, it was just not my taste to read something that's so gory, I guess. I don't remember why it was disgusting because I blocked it out of my memory. I think it had to do with bugs or something, but like I just was not into that. It was like bodily bug things, and I just, no thank you. Next is 99% Mine by Sally Thorne. So this was the second book by the author of The Hating Game, and I think I read this one before The Hating Game, or tried to read it rather, and I very quickly realized it was not for me. The biggest issue with this one for me was the writing, which is really interesting because I ended up reading The Hating Game and I liked the writing. I didn't have an issue with the writing. I enjoyed that book a lot, but this one I didn't like the writing, and it was just weird, and didn't like the relationship. Nothing about it worked for me. So I read a little bit and then I skimmed to see if it got better, and it didn't. So then I just gave up on it. Next is I Kissed Alice by Anna Birch. This is another book I really thought I was going to love, but it's another issue where I found that the characters were pretty indistinguishable from each other. And because it was dual perspective, it was very frustrating to me to not really know whose perspective I was reading from. So this is a female-female romance, and it is following two characters who it's an enemies to lovers, they're rivals, but they actually also are friends and collaborating on something together, but they don't know like who it actually is. So they're collaborating on this comic. Like, it's really cool, a very artsy story, but it was ultimately just the characters, and I didn't feel like there was enough development in their relationship, and the fact that they felt very similar to me just bothered me. I also very recently DNF'd Simmer Down by Sarah Smith. This is another enemies to lovers story that I DNF'd. I swear there are some that I have enjoyed, but in this case, I just could not get behind the love interest. He immediately was just not a great character, someone who I found irredeemable, and to top it off, the setting wasn't what I was expecting, and I was also kind of annoyed by the main character, so I was like, well, I just don't think this one is gonna work for me. Next is Odd and True by Kat Winters, which I tried to read last year. I have read another Kat Winters book that I really liked, but this one I just couldn't get into it. I felt like there wasn't a lot happening, and I was kind of confused, so wasn't for me. I know this video is probably quite repetitive at points, but there's only so many reasons that I have for DNFing things. And I believe this is the final book. I might be forgetting some, but that is The Forbidden Orchid by Sharon Biggs Waller. I had been listening to the audiobook for this one, and I got pretty far through, like I was 3/4 of the way through, and I just kind of lost interest in the story. I didn't feel like it was going many places, and I felt like I was more interested in the idea of it than the actual execution, unfortunately. So those are all the books that I just couldn't bring myself to finish for one reason or another. I hope that if you have read these books, that you did like them, that you did finish them. They just weren't for me. You know, reading is a very personal thing. I feel like no one reads the same books. So if something didn't work out for me, it doesn't mean that it won't work out for you, and vice versa. But thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Please let me know if you like to DNF, if you have, if you definitely can't do that, what books you've DNF'd. Let me know down below, and I will see you guys in a new video soon. Bye!